on. Oh wait, why does the stop button have a square around it? You guys might not be able to see it, but there's a square around the stop button. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to stop the video yet because it's a history video today about Courland. As you see, Courland is this thing right here. You can look at the different providences, or whatever these things are, labeled here. Anyways, this history video is on Courland, a state that I recently found out about, which sort of existed for a little bit in history, but overall it got the short end of the stick being a nation, and I'm going to be going over its history. Alright, so Courlandian or Courlandic history begins with the ancient Couronians. It's unknown when they arrived. Well, I couldn't find any information on the Couronians when they arrived in Courland, but I think on Wikipedia it said they were ancient, so they might have been there for a while, but I don't know. Anyways, the Couronians in the region were likely of pagan religion, or however you say it, which I think is what the Vikings were in their religion. They were of pagan religion. Overall, I think this is during the 8th or something century, they were pagan religion. Things went along. They had many wars with the other tribes in the region, like the Semigalians, which would be important later to the Couronians, and several other tribes in the region, which they fought with for several times. Anyways, they did that for centuries and continued to reside in the region until the 12th century, when I think it was called either the Livonian Order, maybe? I don't know, but the Livonian Order was set up in the region by, I believe, the Teutonic Order, which was a German state in the regions of Prussia, and I believe Danzig, or as they now call it, Gandinsk, I think. And the Livonian Order was mega Christian, and they managed to convert the state of Courland to Christianity, and its pagan religion was forgotten. Anyways, during the 12th century, I believe in 1237, they were annexed by the Teutonic Order. Now, I think they were just annexed by the Teutonic Order, and not the Livonian Order. Anyways, there's a big thing about the Livonian Wars, which I think had something to do with Courland, but I'll do a history video on the Livonian Wars when I find out more about it. Pretty cool. It was known as the Livonian Wars, which is a really brilliant name. Anyways, in the 1500s, the state would be reborn as, I believe, it was sort of a thing in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. It was pretty much a fief, or a vassal of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and I believe the word fief is Polish for, I think, either vassal, or it might not be. Basically means it's technically part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and it sort of is, and it has its own king. I'm not sure who the king was, but in the 1500s, Courland, or I think it was known as the Duchy of Courland and Semigalia, which Semigalia was a tribe in the region which was next to the Couronians. Anyways, I believe it was called Courland and Semigalia, which was basically a union between the two states. Although I don't think Semigalia ever got its state though, but it sort of had a name. Anyways, in the 1500s, the state wanted to try its hand at colonialism, and they tried several times to colonize several areas. Anyways, their first colonial attempt, I'm not sure when they tried to, but their first time at trying to colonize something was at Tobago, which Trinidad, and it was near, Trinidad, it was Trinidad and Tobago, except they never tried colonizing Trinidad. Instead, they just tried colonizing the island of Tobago, and the first time they tried colonizing that failed really badly. The second time they tried colonizing, they learned from their mistakes, brought more people to colonize the island, and they defeated the natives on the island and took the island, and they colonized it. I believe they tried colonizing lands in Australia, I think. I'm not completely sure, but I don't think they did. They might have, I'm not sure. The next thing they tried colonizing was Gambia. I believe it was an island. It's not an island, it's a territory in Africa. And that actually went really well for them. I think they tried colonizing some land in Ghana too, but that failed. Overall, their colonial empire then began to collapse. I think in the late 1500s, maybe the 1600s actually, when the island of Tobago, I believe, would be lost to the Dutch. And they still had Gambia, but a few years after the loss of Tobago, they then would lose Gambia to the British. Overall, their colonial empire collapsed after a while. Anyways, in 1795, I believe they would be annexed by Russia in the first partition of Poland. It might have been the second, I'm not completely sure. But, yeah, it was one of those. Anyways, they then were annexed by Russia, which Russia sort of allowed them to exist in Russia as a province in Russia, but overall, Russia owned them completely. The next thing, overall, over the 1800s, they continued to be owned by Russia. Napoleon invaded, and I don't think he went through Courland. He might have, but I don't think he did. Anyways, Napoleon was defeated. Didn't really involve Courland that much. Courland would then... There would be something with Courland in World War I. During World War I, Russia would invade Germany would invade Courland during World War I. And they successfully actually took them, and they formed a puppet state in the area of Courland known as Urberstadt. I think it was Urberstadt or Landesurberstadt. Something like that. Basically, it was a puppet in Courland that lasted until the Treaty of, I think it was called Brest-Litovsk. Something like that. Overall, I don't think the treaty did affect Courland a bit, but I think after the treaty was signed, Courland actually existed for a bit again in 1918. They declared themselves as an independent state, but it didn't really last very long. It didn't last very long, and was engulfed by another German puppet known as the United Baltic Duchy. Anyways, it was annexed by the United Baltic Duchy, although that didn't last very long after World War I was lost from the Central Powers, and the United Baltic Duchy was annexed by the Soviet Union. Courland didn't really have... Actually, no. Courland wasn't annexed by the Soviet Union. Latvia annexed Courland. Overall, Courland was okay with the annexation by Latvia, and around this time, a lot of people then started to forget about Courland, and there wasn't really much of it in Europe anymore. It was owned by Latvia. Anyways, during World War II, the Russians would invade Latvia, and Courland was incorporated into, I believe, the Russian Republic, or whatever Latvia was in the Soviet Union. It was incorporated into that. Although during the German invasion of the Soviet Union in World War II, the Germans swept through Courland, and the Courland Pocket was formed. The Courland Pocket didn't really see much action during the war with Moscow. Overall, it was far behind the lines. Until I believe in 1943 or 42, Russia started pushing the Germans back, and they would then hit the Courland Pocket, where the German and Soviet forces would fight ruthlessly over the region. Although the Germans didn't really do well at all in the Courland Pocket, as they were pushed out, and the Soviets recovered the land. After World War II, the state of Courland was reincorporated into the Soviet, or whatever the Soviets had for Latvia. I think Latvia had its own little Soviet republic in the Soviet Union, and I think yeah, Courland was part of that, and that's where well, during actually no, this skips a lot of history. Um, Overall, Courland existed as the well, part of the Latvian Soviet Republic, which is owned by the Soviet Union, and it was owned by them. Not really much happens during the 1900s. The Cold War rages on, and Courland is still part of the Soviet Union until 1991, when the Soviet Union collapses and Courland doesn't declare independence, as it becomes one with Latvia again. Anyways, this is where things are now. Courland doesn't exist, and there are no independence movements in Courland, even though they totally could get independence. And if Courland does start fighting for independence, I support it, because I think Courland is cool. Anyways, that's basically the history of Courland. They failed having a colonial empire. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth accepted them as a sort of thing in them, and the ancient Curonians used to live in the region, and they still sort of do. They actually, no, they still do. Anyways, the Curonians were their own ethnicity group, and they were here a long time ago, and they're still probably here today, which means they totally could get independence if they just fought for it. And if they did fight for it, I would support it, because Courland is cool. It even had its own, well, it used to have a tiny colonial empire, and it did formally exist as a state, sort of state, a long time ago, I meant. So, yeah, they totally could get independence. But anyways, this is my video on Courland, pretty obscure country, and this is it right here. You can look at the maps today. It's part of Latvia now. And overall, this is my history of Courland. I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe. I desperately need subs for now. And yeah, I'm cutting it off. Alright, see ya.